You think I'm going to give you people anything? I gave you what you wanted with Invisible Man's Revenge. Now I take.
In 2017, Universal Studios announced the birth of a new shared universe of monster movies, bringing their classic horror icons into the contemporary franchise film landscape. But after the critical and financial failure of its first installment, the project was indefinitely abandoned. Now, in 2024, the powers that be have called upon one pulp horror devotee and one snarky film critic to unearth the concept. I'm Dylan Roth.
And I'm Dalton DeShane. Are you afraid of the dark universe?
Welcome back to Are You Afraid of the Dark Universe, the podcast where we attempt to resurrect Universal's failed cinematic universe of monster movies, one pitch at a time. I am your, let's see, you're
blowing it, Dalton.
You
gotta come locked and loaded with these.
I am your host, Dalton DeShane.
And I am your very patient host, Dylan Roth.
And we're going to need that patience because we are here. I mean, for you, the listener at home, this one episode is a normal amount. But for us, we're recording two of them back to back.
Yes, we are doing a doubleheader here tonight because Dalton, despite swearing this would never happen,
I swore it would never, ever happen,
has written a script too long for one episode.
Look, we'll get into it, but we are also in the middle of a heat wave in New York City.
Yes, we've turned the air conditioner off in Dalton's studio.
We are going to be so sweaty.
You're going to die.
We're recording video clips right now, and we're going to be sweaty messes in them by the time we get to whatever social clip we're going to release. But we're going to power through for you, the listener, through what is probably going to be a 4-hour recording session.
Woo!
To get through this monster, no pun intended, Van Helsing script. Look, it's the finale of the Carmilla trilogy.
Yeah.
I really didn't think it was going to be this long. I knew exactly where it was going to end, as usual.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll talk about one particular sequence when we get to it, but I definitely, in my head, was like, oh yeah, I've mapped out everything that needs to happen. This is going to be like the same length as everything. And then Act 2, Part 1 was almost as long. By the time we got to an end of it, it was almost as long as one of our normal episodes. And it's not, okay, but I'm coming at it from the other way, because the opposite thing that you and I have is you are a big fan of your dialogue scenes and your character moments, and you don't like to cut those.
Yes.
This was me. I am being as efficient as possible, just getting through the scenes I need to happen to. Like, I couldn't have, if I cut this down at all, it would have really been just like a pitch, like, hey, in this scene, this thing needs to happen, and then we're moving on. But I didn't want to shortchange people on the Carmilla trilogy finale.
Right, because it's been a long time.
Super, super pitchy after after a musical, and then, Invisible Man's Revenge was pretty
both
detailed.
Of those scripts were very well fleshed out. And so, yeah, you kind of set yourself up here, not to mention the way that you initially pitched this in our season 3 slate.
Yes.
Where it's sort of our Civil War.
I did
say that. Which sort of makes it Dark Legion 2.5.
I did say that, yes, in that episode.
And a lot of the expectations that we received from our social media audience really hinge on, they're really expecting a lot out of that. Mm-hmm. And especially since you are always about fulfilling the promise of the premise, you really had no choice. Dalton, even though it would be easy for me to just make fun of you and not also,
and you can. It's
and
earned.
not also
it's earned.
Tip my hat, Dalton. Not that this kind of thing is ever in doubt, but thank you for committing really hard to this.
I always commit to the bit. Like I said, I could have zoomed out farther pitch wise, but I don't want to do that to the fans. And also don't want to do it to these characters. This is going to be a very important turning point for everybody. No spoilers or anything, but the movie before Dark Legion 3 is going to have some big consequences.
It's almost like a season finale, right?
Yeah.
Even though we have Death's Door coming up right after this.
It's sweeps week.
Yeah, exactly. This is May sweeps, and then we have the finale in June.
Do kids know what Sweeps Week are anymore? Do our listeners know about
Sweeps Week is a term from back in the day when film critics, or other TV critics, used to only receive like advanced tapes for episodes during certain seasons where they would sweep the entire television landscape and review all the shows. And so it was a matter of, these were very important ratings times. So a lot of really important episodes, big events, character deaths, showy format breaking episodes would happen in November and May because that's when critics were going to be able to be seeing this stuff ahead of time and be hyping it up if it's good for audiences. Pump the rating thanks to those expectations, and then ensure another season being ordered of their show.
Luckily, we control if another season is ordered of our show,
and we've already done
approved it.
Yes.
Yeah. More on that in the coming months. But
let's not shortchange it. You, the listening audience, have really assured that we're going to do another season.
Yeah, if I think the first day we released The Mummy, the first week probably we got like 10 downloads.
Yeah.
If we were still getting 10 downloads an episode, we probably wouldn't be doing this anymore.
No, probably
not. And I sure wouldn't be putting this much effort into these scripts.
But the thing is that we'd finish out the saga. We'd say, hey, that was fun. What do you want to do now? Instead, we have an audience. We have patrons. We have a really lovely listenership that's been very active with us, and we love attention. We love attention. And we don't want that attention to go away. So we're sticking with it.
And speaking of the audience,
let's go to some of those expectations. We got a lot to talk about.
There were a lot of expectations. I do read the expectations, and so I was looking at them already. But yes, Dylan, go ahead.
Well, I've curated this a little bit just because there was too much. Apologies to anybody who really wanted the prediction read on the air. Some things were overlapping. And
I'm already sweating, and we're just starting.
Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about just kind of the bones of the movie, what people expect in terms of tone or structure.
Sure.
These things aren't necessarily expectations so much as cool ideas. On the Discord, Balthazar would be interested in seeing you tackle a similar structure to Dracula Lives, where there are chapters and Van Helsing is teaming up with different characters from the Dark Legion while working towards taking down Carmilla.
It would be cool if their movies sort of mirrored each other in a way. Yeah,
and it would be an interesting way. And they were also both positioned right before Dark Legion, which is cool.
Yeah.
A way to sort of allow there to be a lot of Dark Legion characters in it without it really turning into a Dark Legion movie. Interesting idea. A lot of people are expecting to see characters who would normally just be in a Dark Legion movie. Sylvia the Cephalopod wants to see Cassie do something, especially since we have that teaser that her sister is coming back.
We got a teaser. Who knows if I'm actually going to follow up on it?
Yeah, who knows?
Maybe I'm just going to leave that dangling.
Peyton thinks it would be cool to have an animated intro sequence that showcases the fates of the different Van Helsings before the movie begins. I think that some kind of recap to set up like the idea that she's the last of the Van Helsings would be kind of cool. And that's a nice way to do it.
I want to say like there were so many cool ideas. A lot of things about how we could break the format with this one. I think the animation idea is really cool. A lot of like new things to introduce. And I would also love that. But as I was sort of alluded to, I had so many boxes to check here. My biggest regret with this is I would like to like get some space from it and come back and see if there's something weird or cool. But I also don't know that it needs to serve that purpose. But like the idea of like an animated intro sequence, I would love to like, obviously we can't see the animation on a podcast, but the idea of doing new stylistic things like the musicals and stuff is always very appealing to me. But there was very little room for that kind of experimentation just because I was like, all right, all these, I'm wrapping
you just got too much to do.
I'm wrapping up so many threads that I've introduced that like,
there's so much substance to tackle that style kind of has to take a back seat.
Yeah, unfortunately. And I hope that all pays off. It just means I'll have to go harder on style, after Dark Legion 3.
Well, speaking of style, Design Skeleton wants this to be the goriest movie of our Dark Universe. Wall-to-wall violence with lots and lots of secondary and tertiary characters eating it.
Wow.
Our central character, or title character at least, is a ruthless killer, so that's not an unfair expectation. Thematically, Captain Chris Vale's half-sibling says this one is going to be a reflection on what makes humans human and monsters monsters, and are they really that different? A bunch of people are really jumping on the whole Marvel Civil War of it all. Lee on the Discord thinks this movie will end exactly where Dark Legion 3 starts, and the team will be bitterly divided by the end of this film. Andy AM23 on Instagram says it would be interesting if the Legion gets split in half over an unsavory way that they could bring Carol back to life that would tie directly into Death's Door.
People really want Carol brought back to life.
Yeah, there are a bunch of predictions that are specifically about this movie. Like the goal they're trying to reach is to bring back Carol, and that's the thing that divides them.
You think I'm going to give you people anything? I gave you what you wanted with Invisible Man's Revenge. Now I take.
BM Squared thinks that there will be some kind of nod to Hugh Jackman's take on Van Helsing. Nothing that makes it canon, just a cute bit, cute little nod.
Because we did add Hugh Jackman to the Dark Universe in our last episode. Hugh Jackman is our first canonical ghost.
Yes, that's true. If you have not listened to The Ghost and Mrs. Muir, you should check that out, because not only is it a great pitch from our friend Magnolia Porter, but it also is canonically relevant, we decided by the end of it. I don't know if any of that made it into your script, considering it was well into writing by the time we recorded with Magnolia, but some people have alluded to it in their predictions, so who knows? Roxanne thinks this will maybe be something that gets covered in Death's Door, but expects that society should be slow-mo collapsing in a Children of Men sort of way in response to the everybody goes to hell and nothing can be done about it. I only touched on this pretty briefly in my episodes, and you haven't really you've had a lot of Carmilla stuff going on in yours. That is something that I'm interested to see, and if it doesn't get covered here, we will surely be getting to it in Death's Door. I would be disappointed with myself if we don't. Gimmick got bored and, on Instagram, wants to see if Adelaide has a trophy room of her and her family's past kills that could be full of Easter eggs, mounted heads of various movie monsters.
Very fun. Love that.
Marquez thinks that Van Helsing herself will get monsterized, and it has to be sort of, again, an inversion of Dracula Lives, where she has to deal with the repercussions of becoming something that she hates. There was a conversation in the Discord that also was reflected in this post on Instagram by Pagan Poetaster, is that the first instinct that this person had is that Adelaide would try to push Jenny into do something unethical in order to beat Carmilla. But it would be more interesting if Jenny actually goes too far and Adelaide has to pull her back. This sentiment was independently posted in different forums, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, people talking about like who would go further. And there was also some talk of like Carol being in hell, having to watch Jenny do awful things on her behalf.
In a similar way to the way that Vale is in hell, watching people forget about him. One thing that everyone's in agreement on is that Jenny and Adelaide will be having messy, hate-fueled sex. Because just anyone who needs a refresher, in the post-credits to Love Never Dies, Jenny arrives on Adelaide's doorstep looking for revenge against Carmilla. And, she's in mourning. We don't know anything about Adelaide's sexuality, but given that Dalton's writing this episode, I think we can guess that she might be bisexual.
Dalton does not write straight women.
No. She wouldn't even have to be. We haven't established her she'll probably like girls, I would say.
And on the note of Love Never Dies, as much as I like to say that you can jump on with any episode, and you can, it's like comic books. You can just pick up a random comic book and get into it.
Right. We try to provide you enough context.
I will say this is me doing serialized storytelling. Yeah. And it will especially benefit from having listened to The Phantom of the Opera, Love Never Dies, which you should listen to anyway because it's a musical.
It's great.
And also, to a lesser degree, The Invisible Man's Revenge, but that is also recommended listening before this ep.
On Instagram, Espresso Therapist would like to see if Adelaide kills one of the core Dark Legion members in this episode. Roxanne on the Discord says, R.I.P. Jack Griffin, and Jenny will cause it.
Wow. They think Jenny's going to do Jack dirty?
Well, not necessarily. She doesn't say that Jenny will murder Jack.
True.
She says that Jenny will
caused Carol's death.
Exactly.
But,
something like that. Kevin Bauer on Twitter thinks that Jenny will use so much magic that she nearly kills herself and is forced to never touch it again. There are also some other predictions about more characters that will show up. Sylvie the Cephalopod says that Esmeralda will join Team Adelaide. Just as a reminder for people, we did do reshoots on Hunchback so that Esmeralda does survive that film.
Yeah.
And Ian wants to see flashbacks with Hugh Dancy's Van Helsing training or mentoring Adelaide, but mostly because he just wants Hugh Dancy back.
Yeah, we love Hugh Dancy. And we try to bring him back for flashbacks as often as we can. Or dream sequences.
Joan Palmer, 23 on Instagram, thinks that Adelaide and Jenny will form a darker legion and that Elsa Falk will be a member by the end of the film. And Frodo Man, 76, thinks that there will be a Kathy Bates cameo reprising her role from the Dark Universe Omnibus.
I am delighted by all the amazing ideas that our fans have once again. There's some really fun ones in here. And also delighted that none of you have guessed my plans. Dylan, but I am also very interested to hear what your predictions and expectations for this are. You know something.
I know too much, I think, to say.
Well, there were some details we had to work out ahead of time because we're leading right into Dark Legion 3. And so I also had to give you some instructions on the Dracula post-credits of like, hey, this is where we need to end up in order to go into Dark Legion 3. Because Dark Legion 3 is the film we've had the most idea of what we're going to do going into it.
Yeah,
although there's still a lot to fill in. Yes. But I am curious if you have any expectations or predictions about this that don't touch the things you already know.
I am predicting that this is going to be your most action movie script that you've written as by yourself.
Yeah.
I think that this is going to be a full-on blockbuster. I think it's going to be very heavy and very violent and a bad time. But that if you were to be watching it, you would also be dazzled and thrilled by chases and fight scenes and stuff. And given that you've written so much action, I'm very excited to see the scale and scope of the action. But yeah, that's my expectation. I think this one's going to be. I think you're going hard with the Civil War of it this time.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things when I decided I wanted to do a Van Helsing movie for this phase was, I mean, really there's just one canonical just Van Helsing movie for us to base it on, and that's the Universal Stephen Sommers one with Hugh Jackman.
Yeah, and that's an action movie.
Which is an action movie with horror elements just like The Mummy. And it's also a movie that gets multiple monsters involved, right? You've got Jekyll and Hyde in that movie. You have you have werewolves, you have vampires, you don't have a creature or a mummy.
Well, they're probably saving those for the sequel that didn't happen.
Yes. And so I was like, oh, well, this kind of has to be our monster mash, right? A little bit. We have to get more people in here. But I would say, yeah, it partially because I was drawing a bit from the influence of that, leans more action heavy. And that brings me to Stephen Sommers was almost my pick for the director of this movie before I thought better of it, because I looked at his filmography and I was like, please tell me he's done something recently that will redeem him in my mind. No. The filmography is looking like 1999 Mummy. Pretty good. Was not impressed by everything else. And so I was like, maybe not the right choice. Instead...
You don't like his Lost in Space? That's him, right?
I don't know.
I think so. That movie is not good, but it is kind of cool if you happen to have been 10 when it came out.
Well, same with Van Helsing. I have gone with someone who probably should have been in the Dark Universe director-wise a long time ago, but is a white guy, and we try to avoid those.
I mean, I think that we've reached the point where we don't have to be... I'm sorry, correction. Lost in Space was directed by Stephen Hopkins.
Okay.
A mistake I'm sure that many have made. The director of Predator 2.
Yes, but we've gone to a point where I think the Dark Universe has a very good diversity balance among our directors.
Yeah.
And so we can get a couple token white guys in here. We have already. We've got Sam Raimi and stuff.
Sure.
I've gone with Dan Trachtenberg.
I love Dan Trachtenberg.
The director of Prey.
Yes.
With, of course, Amber Midthunder. Ardwen Conliffe, and also 10 Cloverfield Lane.
Yes.
It seems like it's his time to graduate to like a blockbuster action movie.
Let's go.
Like, I wouldn't be surprised if that actually happened very soon. Like, Prey was such a, critical darling, and people seem to love it. I would not be surprised if Marvel or someone handed him the keys to a franchise and were like, go crazy. I mean, he did a Cloverfield, and it's
the best one.
Yeah, it's the best Cloverfield. So I think he would kill this. I think this being his move to the big leagues from Prey would be incredible.
I think that he's doing the next Predator movie as well. I think that's the franchise to which he's been given the keys.
True. I guess, yeah, he has been given... but it was a Hulu premiere, so, I'm thinking like a theatrical...
the reason that it was a Hulu premiere was just to keep it off HBO Max.
Yeah.
Which is such a fucking bummer. For those of you who don't know the lunatic politics of all of this, because Prey was greenlit before Disney brought 20th Century Fox, it inherited the deal that 20th Century had made with HBO to have the streaming rights after theatrical release. So it would go on Max. And so in order to keep it out of Max, they decided not to put it in theaters, which would get around the deal, and they released it directly to Hulu. And what a mistake. What a terrible, tragic mistake.
I let that off-topic rant go on purely because we are doing a 2-part episode, and so it will not push this episode into the 3-hour territory. So we can go on the why Prey went to streaming rant. We can keep that in.
They should put it in theaters now.
They should.
Someone pointed out that a double feature of Prey and Alien Romulus would be fucking great to do.
Fuck yeah.
Anyway, I guess we'll do a script now.
Yeah, I guess we'll get into I think the listeners have gotten what they wanted. They got Dylan's movie industry.
Yeah, that's
update.
it. We'll call it. We'll make this one
All
short.
right.
Actually, we'll make this a 3-part episode. This is part 1.
Yeah,
first 20 minutes, and then we'll start it next week.
Yeah, see you next week for part. No, okay. Let's do a Van Helsing.
All right.
What do you say?
Let's go.
Submitted for the approval of the Universal Studios Board of Directors parody, and you, the listening audience. This is Dalton DeShane's Van Helsing. Prologue. Berlin, Germany, 2009. The camera pushes through the city, low to the ground, sticking to the shadows. It's late at night, the streets dark and blanketed with a thick fog. The door of a pub opens and we hear the sudden noise of drunken revelers inside. The camera glances toward it, then turns from the sound and flees into the bushes outside a nearby apartment building. We peek out from the bushes and look up to a window on the 3rd floor, the softest glow coming from within. Cut to inside the room. The soft glow we saw was coming from a Lilo and Stitch nightlight plugged in next to the bed. I guess we can't use Lilo and Stitch, right? That's a Disney property.
I mean, let's license it.
Yeah, we can license the nightlight. Lilo and Stitch nightlight. We zoom in on the bed where a young girl, about 6 years old, sleeps, wrapped around a stuffed animal of Donkey from Shrek.
Separate license.
That's Universal.
It's DreamWorks.
Doesn't Universal own DreamWorks?
No, they have a distribution deal.
Oh,
It's close enough.
That'll be a cheap.
Hope you're all enjoying this.
Yeah. The quiet is broken by the sound of the window scraping open, then a soft padding on the floor. A shadow passes across the child's sleeping form as she slowly awakes. Mom? She looks around the room. The window is slightly open. Fog pours through and seeps into the room, gathering on the floor. Mom? She scans across the room until her eyes land on the open closet door. All seems dark. She reaches to her bedside table and turns on a small spherical object. It's a spinning starlight, but half of it is broken, so only half the room is covered in purple light as it turns. The light passes by the closet once. Nothing. All is dark. It completes another rotation and scans over the closet a second time. Still nothing. A third rotation, and this time it faintly illuminates a pair of large cat eyes about 4 feet above the floor. The girl gasps and turns off the light. She pulls the covers up over her head and squeezes her eyes shut, breathing hard. After a while, her breath calms, and she listens hard for any noise in her room. There's none. She gathers her courage and slowly pulls down the covers. A woman is kneeling next to her bed. We recognize her as Carmilla, played by Carrie Ann Moss. Her hands are placed flat on the comforter, and she looks at the young girl with soft eyes and a slight smile. The girl does not seem frightened. She looks into Carmilla's eyes and eventually smiles back. Carmilla gets up and climbs into bed with the girl, lying beside her. She starts to gently run her hand through the girl's hair.
It's okay, little one. This is just a dream.
The girl begins to drift off to sleep. The camera cuts close on her peaceful face as her breathing grows slow and shallow. We can no longer see Carmilla. Suddenly, the girl opens her eyes and erupts with an ear-splitting shriek. Instantly, the girl's nanny bursts into the room and turns the lights on. The room is empty except for the little girl.
What's wrong? What is it, Liebchen?
Something poked me. She points to her chest. The nanny examines her, but there's no marks of any kind. A man and woman rush into the room. We recognize these two as Mina and Abraham Van Helsing, played by Anna Friel and Hugh Dancy. Adelaide? Adelaide, what happened? The nanny answers.
Nothing, Herr Abraham. Just a bad dream.
What kind of dream? Young Adelaide Van Helsing rubs her chest. Something sharp poked me. Abraham's face turns deadly serious. He kneels by the bed and feels the sheets next to Adelaide where Carmilla had lain. He turns to Mina. It's warm. He then snaps to the nanny. Call Father Hesselius. We need him here right away.
But it's 11 p.m.
He'll come. Go.
Point of order. would the bed be warm if a vampire laid in it?
I will address that right after the prologue.
Okay.
The nanny rushes out of the room. Adelaide holds her donkey and begins to cry. Mina sits down next to her and calms her down. She tells her to go back to sleep, confirming it was a bad dream. She tucks her in and wishes her good night, then turns off the light and steps into the hall with the worried Abraham. As soon as the door closes, Adelaide climbs out of bed and tiptoes over to it to listen to her aunt and uncle. We hear their hushed voices through the door.
She's not turned, is she?
I don't think so. She didn't look to have ingested any blood. We'll have Hyselius perform the rites just in case.
Thank God we got here in time.
No. She never meant to turn her. She was taunting us. Taunting me.
She? You mean this wasn't the Count?
Silence. We can imagine Abraham shaking his head.
And who?
Zoom in on Adelaide's wide, confused eyes as Abraham says through gritted teeth, Carmilla. Title card, Van Helsing. So, the thing about the cold, this is an adaptation of a scene from the Carmilla book.
Okay.
I actually wrote this before I wrote any words of Invisible Man's Revenge, because I was reading Carmilla, and I was like, this would be perfect if this were Adelaide and Carmilla's first meeting.
Gotcha.
And in that, there is a bit about the bed still being warm after Carmilla has disappeared. I believe. I'm pretty sure I got it from there. It's the kind of thing
It's a
where
little thing. It's not really important.
we could be like, oh, there's an indentation or something, you know?
Right. I feel bad for interrupting the flow, but I've been trying to do more with feedback, trying to give you more feedback lately.
It's a good detail.
Yes.
I think I got it from the Carmilla book, but maybe I just made it up and made a mistake.
Listen, the scene is neat. It's chilling. I like the way, I love the image of the semi-spherical light passing over and nothing, and then there's something there. I think that's very evocative.
And that imagery may come back into play very, very soon here.
Wonderful.
Anything else on the prologue?
No, let's just keep going.
Act 1. The title card disappears with a boom of thunder. We're directly in the middle of a fearsome ocean squall with torrential rain, lightning, and enormous waves. On-screen text tells us that we're 10 miles off the coast of Ireland. Unbelievably, a sailboat has managed to stay afloat in the midst of this, although it's taking on water fast. We cut to one of two crew members of this boat. It's Adelaide Van Helsing, played by Micah Monroe, soaking wet in her black raincoat and screaming commands at her crewmate from the captain's wheel. We cut to the crewmate, Dr. Jennifer Halsey, played by Annabelle Wallace. She's slipping along the deck, pulling at ropes and trying to keep the ship sailing. Adelaide shouts, "Come on, you rich British bitch! Don't you know how to sail?" Adelaide continues in voiceover. "My name is Adelaide Van Helsing, and I'm the last of my kind." Jenny grits her teeth in defiance and slings a magic lasso around one of the sails, yanking and collapsing it, the momentum sending her splashing into the water on the deck. But when she looks up, she sees something in the distance.
Look!
A lighthouse cuts through the storm in the distance. Lightning crackles all around it. It sits on a tiny island, barely more than an outcropping of rocks jutting out of the sea. Adelaide smiles. More voiceover. "I am the sole remaining descendant of the Van Helsing dynasty, a lineage that has been hunting vampires for hundreds of years." The sailboat drops anchor off the shore of the island. Jenny and Adelaide stand at the edge of the deck in the rain, looking at each other. "You ready to end this?" Jenny nods. They dive into the rough waters. Voiceover. For most of recorded history, 3 vampire clans have staked their claim over the earth. Jenny and Adelaide climb onto the island and head for the lighthouse, bracing themselves on either side of the entrance. They give each other a look, then kick the door down. The inside of the lighthouse has been retrofitted with electric equipment, some of it extremely modern, some of it looking like the equipment in the 1931 Frankenstein, all antennae and crackling electricity. The machines are manned by a team of female vampires who turn to the intruders and attack. But they're no match for Adelaide and Jenny, who make quick work of them with a combination of stakes and guns that shoot paintballs filled with holy water, which, as an aside, I picture the holy water not killing them, but like bursting a crater in them as if they were hit by a shotgun at close range. Adelaide's voiceover comes in again as they fight. 2 of them, led by Ahul and Count Dracula, have been eliminated. Unfortunately, not by my hand, but by their own. Jenny and Adelaide work their way up the stone spiral staircase, staking vamp ladies as they go, trying to keep the kills as quiet as possible. We begin to hear the deep roar of machinery, growing louder as they get higher. The staircase dead ends at a steel door. Jenny goes to open it, but Adelaide puts a hand on her shoulder and shakes her head. She gestures at the window next to them. Jenny understands. She magics the window open, and Adelaide sticks her head out into the torrential rain. She pulls out a grappling hook and fires it straight into the air. As it falls back down toward them, it catches on the lip of the lighthouse's high wall. Adelaide pulls it taut, and they scale the outer wall of the lighthouse. Adelaide's voiceover. That leaves just one. The roof of the lighthouse has been torn off by some force, physical or magical, leaving just walls ending in jagged steel. Just over this lip is a steel catwalk encircling the light station, looking down at the lantern. Jenny and Adelaide quietly take out the vampires standing guard on the catwalk. Below them, just visible on the other side of the lantern, is a vampire played by Carrie-Anne Moss. Adelaide's voiceover. Carmilla. Adelaide and Jenny sneak around the catwalk to get a better view. The lantern is spinning faster than it should, illuminating the vampires gathered below in flashes as it rolls by. A metal antenna sticks out from the lantern, reaching high into the storm before separating into spinning arms like the skeleton of an umbrella. Voiceover. Kill her, and her entire line turns to dust. A world without vampires. Adelaide and Jenny lie on the catwalk on their stomachs. Adelaide reaches back and grabs another stake from her belt. I've been training my whole life for this moment. She grabs the stake tight in her hand. It's time to make my family proud. A voice cuts through the storm, momentarily distracting her. It's time, Mother! It's Carmilla's assistant, Emma, played by Jasmine Savoy Brown. When Adelaide looks back at Carmilla, she's disappeared behind the lantern. Adelaide curses, and her and Jenny crawl around to get another vantage point on the catwalk. What they see makes their jaws drop. Next to the lantern is Aminet's sarcophagus, suspended in midair by chains. Water runs down its slick shell and pours onto the floor. A curved glass tube runs from a hole in the top of the sarcophagus to a container against the wall. It's the Black Bellarmine, last seen in Love Never Dies. Lightning strikes the antenna, sending sparks raining down on Adelaide and Jenny. Carmilla shouts, "Now!" and she and Emma pull two large switches simultaneously. A glowing black light begins to travel along the glass tube from the Bellarmine into the sarcophagus. Aminet's soul. Everyone looks around as unintelligible whispers float through the air, audible to all despite the noise of the storm. Just as the last of the soul empties into the sarcophagus, lightning strikes the antenna again. Electricity surges through it, into a transformer that explodes with the excess energy. Light races from the transformer through metal conduits, into the chains that hold the sarcophagus, and then into the sarcophagus itself, which glows from the electricity. One of the chains snaps and the sarcophagus swings, hanging now at an angle over the ground. The lid falls open, but the inside is still obscured to us. The surge fades, and everyone looks at the sarcophagus. Carmilla approaches and reaches inside. An arm emerges. It's covered in black hieroglyphics like tattoos. A leg stumbles to the wet floor, then another. Aminet emerges, collapsing into Carmilla's arms. Carmilla holds her close and smiles, stroking her wet hair. Close up on Carmilla's mouth, whispering in Aminet's ear.
Rise, princess. Your kingdom awaits you.
Aminet straightens up, standing on her own. She is played, of course, by Sofia Boutella. Her eyes open, the irises in each doubled. In addition to the black markings all over her face and body, she now also bears long black burns where the lightning seared through her. But she's alive. Up on the catwalk, Jenny whispers to Adelaide.
We need to leave, now.
She tries to pull Adelaide up, but Adelaide resists, still clutching her stake.
Adelaide, we can't take them both.
I won't miss my chance again.
I've faced her before. We aren't ready. We need to regroup.
Adelaide grits her teeth, looking down at Carmilla and Aminet. Suddenly, Aminet perks up. Her head turns towards where Adelaide and Jenny lie on the catwalk. They shrink back out of view. Carmilla follows Aminet's gaze, and even though she doesn't see them, she smiles. Adelaide and Jenny rappel down the lighthouse wall down to the rocks. Back atop the lighthouse, Emma sees Aminet and Carmilla looking up to the catwalk. Should I send a team after them?
No. Let them try to stop us.
Outside, Adelaide and Jenny run back to their boat. The rain is starting to let up a bit. Jenny sees something and pulls Adelaide to a stop. There's a second boat anchored next to theirs. They duck behind the rocks and slow their approach, but then a voice calls out,
Jenny?
Jenny stands.
Jack!
Adelaide looks around in confusion, but Jenny sees him right away. A hollow outline in the rain. It's the Invisible Man, Jack Griffin, voiced by John C. Reilly. They run to each other and embrace.
Jenny, oh my gosh! We had no idea what happened to you. I'm okay. I've just been after... Wait, you're here for Carmilla too, aren't you?
A black cat hops up on a rock next to Jack and tries to shake the water off before transforming into Countess Maria Zaleska, played by Janelle Monáe. I hate the rain. Jack sneezes and shivers.
Tell me about it. At least you get to wear clothes.
Jenny raises her eyebrows.
And who is this? Oh, this is Maria. She's my,
Maria looks at Jack with a bemused smile, refusing to save him so she can see how he finishes this thought. He doesn't. Jenny just smiles as well and nods.
Ah, I see. Pleasure to meet you, Maria.
Adelaide approaches cautiously.
Oh, and this is Adelaide. Adelaide Van Helsing. Van Helsing? Like Abraham Van Helsing?
Adelaide nods, and her and Maria exchange a wary glance. I'm his niece.
Oh, thank God. A real-life vampire hunter. Now we'll for sure get to her before she resurrects. Wait. Why are you guys leaving the lighthouse?
Jenny shakes her head.
Whoa. We're too late, aren't we? We should go. It's not safe for us here.
Jenny and Jack turn to the boats, but Maria and Adelaide stand still, staring at each other.
Maria? Come on, we gotta go.
Not with her.
What are you talking about?
I'm not safe near her. And frankly, neither are you.
Maria, she's one of the good guys. She's a Van Helsing.
Oh, I know all about Adelaide Van Helsing. She's not like her relatives. She's ruthless. Hell-bent on murdering anyone she deems as inhuman, as well as any actual humans that get in her way. Teaming up with her is suicide.
But...
Jack looks at Jenny for an explanation, but she doesn't say anything. Instead, Adelaide speaks up. You're not wrong, Countess Zaleska. But right now, I have only one goal. Killing Carmilla and Aminet. If that's your goal too, then we're on the same side. And to be honest, you're safer by my side than in my way. The standoff continues until Jack speaks up.
Look, whatever we do, can we decide later? Right now, there's an ancient mummy and a Dracula up in that tower, and I'd like to be as far away from them as possible.
Maria puts out her hand. Until Carmilla is dead? Adelaide grabs her hand and kisses it. Truce, Countess. A few minutes later, the four of them are at sail. Jack and Jenny stand side by side, looking at the lighthouse in the distance. The storm has shrunk into a vortex swirling around it, crackling with magical energy. Jack has a towel around him, and we can see him still shivering.
You have a personal history with Aminet, don't you?
Jenny nods, a bit of fear creeping into her otherwise stone-cold face.
What do we need to know about her? Just that we're going to need all the help we can get.
The camera zooms slowly toward the lighthouse, its beam spinning wildly through the eye of the storm. Sudden smash cut to Aminet, floating in midair above the lighthouse, just under the clouds. She looks into the camera as if beckoning to us. The image flickers, and then she's walking through the desert. It flickers again, alternating frames between her in the desert and her above the lighthouse. A quick series of shots, zooming in on her eyes, then the dagger of Set from the 2017 Mummy, then her mouth as it whispers, Nick Morton. Nick Morton, played by Tom Cruise, wakes up with a start. He's in a small twin bed under a colorful quilt in a bare guest room. It's the middle of the night. He clutches his chest as if he could somehow will his heart to slow down. The look on his face is pure panic. On-screen text tells us we're in New Mexico. He stumbles downstairs into the kitchen. To his surprise, Charlie Willowbrook, played by Devery Jacobs, is sitting at the table, scrolling through her phone. She looks up at the shirtless Nick as he comes in and pours himself a glass of water.
What happened to you?
Nightmare. Bad one.
Rerun or first time airing?
Rerun, I guess. One I haven't had in a very long time. He sits at the table next to her. Gwen's gone again? Charlie nods.
4th night in a row. I can never sleep while she's out.
Does she know that? She shakes her head. Might be worth talking about.
She's got enough on her mind.
It's been 2 years. It's okay to ask her to get help.
She unknowingly killed her entire family. There's no help in the world for that. All I can do is sit here, do the crossword, and wait for her to come home to me.
Nick looks down at his hands. Charlie sees the look on his face and sets her phone down.
You're going to take her away, aren't you?
Nick winces. Just for a bit. I think something big is coming. I'm going to need her help dealing with it. They're both distracted by the sound of a wolf howling in the distance, although the sound is much more powerful than a single wolf could ever produce. Charlie grabs Nick's hand.
Promise me you'll bring her back.
Nick nods. I promise. I'd sooner die than let anything happen to her.
We've all had enough death.
Cut to the nearby grassy woodlands. An enormous 10-foot-tall werewolf sprints among the trees, sending the wildlife scattering for cover. This werewolf is humanoid, and her face is reminiscent of Gwen Conliffe, played by Amber Midthunder. She comes to the tallest tree in the woods and leaps to its peak in 2 bounds. She hangs from here and howls into the sky, so loud it tears her superhuman vocal cords. The howl grows hoarse and ends in a whimper. She drops back down to the ground and finds herself standing in front of Nick Morton. The werewolf transforms back to her human Gwen Conliffe form, naked but not seeming to care.
What is it? Is it Charlie? Did something happen?
No, nothing like that. I think we need to gather the Legion. Gwen looks at Nick with wide, concerned eyes as the music swells, and we cut to...
Let's pause for a second.
Okay.
All right, we've just gone through a lot.
Yes.
So, first of all, I think it's really smart to give Adelaide the voiceover, because that helps to center it as her movie when there's a lot of stuff going around.
Yes.
So I thought that's a really good touch. I like jumping in medias res into the sequence of, we didn't even talk about Aminet and the expectations, even though there were some Aminet related expectations. Given that was Carmilla's plan from the previous 2 films is to bring Aminet back from the dead. Everything in that sequence is working for me up until the point we find the second boat. Okay. I think that going directly from this opening action sequence that has gone wrong and then bumping into another set of characters from whose story is dovetailing in right there, and then just sliding directly into their conversation, which is exposition heavy and figuring out each other's motives. I would maybe put the sequence with Nick and Charlie in the middle of that to break up that section, because it feels awkward. It's hard to tell, especially in the reading. Has the action sequence ended?
Yeah, I think that's in my mind. As soon as Carmilla's like, let them go, then the music has stopped being intense. Where the rain is lightening up. They're just kind of, rushing back to the boat. But yeah, like the action sequence has ended.
I think we need to have Aminet do her thing where she thinks of Nick or whatever. I think we need to have that be the button that ends that sequence. I think that right now it doesn't really have one. I think that I just think it needs a stronger beat to signal we have now established the stakes and now we're going to go somewhere else for a little bit. Yeah. And then we can put this character stakes together after that.
Yeah.
It's right now also, it's a lot of talking between those characters so close to where everything had been physical and active. Yeah. I think that we just need to create separation. I don't think anything in there doesn't necessarily work.
I think you're right. A lot of this was like, all right, these are all the things that need to happen. What's the best kind of order I can kind of put them in? And I don't think I nailed all of it.
Right.
So
it feels a little info dumpy.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of information that I think that probably over the course of the script could be revealed more gradually about like what does Maria think of Adelaide? Stuff like that.
I could probably do that in this next scene coming up instead of doing it there on the shore.
Maybe. I think it's just, I think to introduce that conflict immediately on the tail of establishing the jeopardy, it feels, it's got this sort of, it leans, you know what I mean? It feels lopsided.
Yeah.
And I think that you could take all that same information and put it after this.
Yeah.
I think you need a little palate cleanser here. Great to see that Charlie's still around.
I wanted to keep Charlie around. And the great thing about a time jump, we don't have to explain it.
They've just been together this whole time.
They've just been together. We had the problem of like, wait, but Gwen's going back to New Mexico. Charlie's going to stay in Paris. How would this relationship even work? Hey,
they've had time. Yeah, maybe they were long distance for a year, and then Charlie came over. Yeah, figure it out. Sounds like the exploration of their long distance relationship and Their story of how they got together. Yeah, great fodder for the fan fiction channel.
Exactly.
Go run with it.
I also wanted to, I think in like an early idea for this, like the whole movie was going to be leading up to the resurrection of Amenet.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized after writing the previous two movies, I was like, there's been so much preamble to this. Like the whole quest to get the Bellarmine and Amenet's soul, and then the whole quest to how do we get the soul in the body and all this stuff. I was like, I think I just need to open with it.
We just do it here.
We just need to pull the trigger. I can't keep stringing people along for a whole nother movie. We just got to bring Amenet back. It's time.
This sort of reminds me, in both good and bad ways, of the first 10 minutes of The Avengers, where we have to tie together a lot of stuff in a way that's accessible to new people, although this not as much of a goal here.
Mm-hmm.
And it's by necessity. I mean, it's a little talky. It's a little fast.
Yeah.
We have to get there because we haven't gotten to the movie yet, right? Now, once that's set, like, okay, the movie can start now.
Mm-hmm.
And it is visually exciting. I did, as you mentioned, the idea of the lighthouse coming back, that visual motif, that's really cool. I wonder if there's going to be another reprise of that at some point in the future. It doesn't have to be. I think that works now in terms of bridging the past and the present.
I'm going to be honest. I realized the link between those two things as I was reading the prologue while we were recording. I was like, hey, this is just like the lighthouse that's going to be in the next scene.
Oh, cool. I mean,
I did that on purpose.
That's the magic of writing. Sometimes your mind is making connections unconsciously that you hadn't even thought of.
We could do a very sick match cut somewhere in there.
Yes. Okay, so we are, Gwen looks at Nick with wide concerned eyes, the music swells, and we cut to
a quiet pub in Ireland, night. Outside, the rain pours. Inside is mostly empty, except for a group of 4 gathered around a table in the shadowy back corner. It's Adelaide, Jenny, Jack, and Maria. Jack is wrapped in a heavy trench coat, his arms around his body, shivering and sneezing intermittently. Maria is locked onto Adelaide, never taking her eyes off the vampire hunter. Adelaide ignores this. What about the werewolf? You still have one of those left, don't you?
You mean Gwen? I mean, yeah, but she's been through enough.
The fate of the world is at stake.
She's been through enough.
Adelaide rolls her eyes. Okay, so the teenage hanger-on. He's the keeper of the lagoon, right? Does he have any powers? Jack sneezes again.
They
what?
They're a child and they're not coming.
Jenny, we need reinforcements. I'm sorry that your legion has been dropping like flies, but isn't this exactly the kind of thing you were assembled for? Maria speaks up. There's 4 of us. That's a bigger team than I've ever had, and I'm betting that goes for you too. We don't need anybody else. If it was just Carmilla, I'd agree, and I would have staked you back at the lighthouse and done the rest myself.
Hey, lady, you need to calm down. We're the Dark Legion, and you're the new guy here, so you do things our way.
You misunderstand, Griffin. Jenny joined up with me. Carmilla has been on my hit list my entire life, so this ain't your little legion of superheroes. You're a Van Helsing now, for as long as you're useful to me. And you better stay useful. She shoots a look at Maria. Otherwise, you're just in my way.
Okay, that's it, lady.
He turns to Jenny.
Come on, Jenny. We don't need her. We can handle this our way.
Jenny looks down at her hands.
No, we can't. Look, I know Adelaide can be a straight-up cunt.
Proudly.
But her methods work. I've seen them. I came to her because she can finish the job. If she's so good at all this, then why is Carmilla still alive?
I don't know, Griffin. Why is she? Jack is quiet. I seem to remember you having a pretty clear shot at her recently in Dubai. Those with glass skin shouldn't cast stones.
Let's get back on track. The problem is Amenet. I faced her down before, and even the combined might of all of Prodigium couldn't stop her. The only thing that could was Nick. We should prioritize bringing him in.
Are you insane? He's the host of Set. The whole reason Carmilla resurrected her was to reunite her with him. Whoa, what are you talking about? 3,000 years ago, the spurned Princess Amenet made a pact with Set, the Egyptian god of death. They became bonded, and she was gifted near limitless power. But the pact was never fully consummated. Her job was to bring Set into this world in the body of a mortal so they could rule over humanity together. Before she could, she was murdered by the Pharaoh's guards, cursed and mummified. It wasn't until 2017 that Set finally entered our world in the body of your friend, Nick Morton.
But Nick is able to control Set.
You think a pig-headed military brat is able to subdue a god? Set has been biding his time, and that time is coming soon. If he reunites with Amenet, you can say goodbye to the Nick Morton you knew, as well as everyone else on this mortal plane. Our primary objective is to kill Carmilla and Aminet. Our secondary is to keep Nick Morton from showing his face within 1,000 miles of either of them. Morton's out.
So's Gwen and Hunter.
Maria looks around the table. So who does that leave? Cut to a rustic village in the south of France. It sits on a hill overlooking the banks of the Rhone River, seemingly untouched by the last 500 years of architectural advancement. We cut to the inside of one of the homes, which is as cozy as it appears from outside, although certainly more modern. A fire roars in a brick fireplace as Cassie Falk, played by Meredith Eaton, yells up the stairs to Victor. Victor Frankenstein, played by Javier Bardem, lurches down the stairs in a gray suit coat hanging over a loose, faded green t-shirt. He wipes some blood away from his neck seams, but then freezes when he sees who's in his living room.
Jenny!
He rushes down the steps as best he can and wraps her in a hug.
We've been so worried about you.
I'm all right, Vic.
He pulls away and sees Jack on his couch holding a hot mug of tea. They also exchange a greeting before Victor sits down in an easy chair across from them.
To what do I owe the pleasure?
Jenny gives an awkward glance toward Jack.
We need your help.
Victor frowns and his shoulders fall a bit.
I haven't seen either of you in 2 years.
I know, and I'm really sorry, Vic. I wanted to visit, but I got so caught up with the restaurant.
Victor puts up a hand to stop him.
It is irrelevant. We were comrades in arms. My family is here.
He reaches over and holds Cassie's hand in his.
I am sorry to waste your time, but I've put my violent past behind me. My place is here now.
We know that, Vic. And you have to know that we wouldn't be here if it wasn't apocalyptically important.
No, you wouldn't.
Jenny winces at the sorrow in his voice.
There are other members of the Legion. What about Nick?
Nick can't know about this.
Why not?
Cassie chimes in, realization on her face.
It's Aminet, isn't it?
Jenny nods. Victor sighs and squeezes Cassie's hand.
Give us a moment. Alone, please.
Yes, of course. Quick question.
Mm-hmm.
How long has it been since since Carol's death?
Couple months.
Okay. Victor did see Jack at her funeral.
Fuck.
Does it matter that much?
No, but you're right. He did.
I mean, technically, he has never seen him.
Well, yeah, that's true. He probably saw his naked ass on the news.
Probably. But yeah, Jack and Victor were both at the funeral, and in the post-credits of that, we do have them share a toast.
True. The sentiment is still here, which is that he has not been visited by the Dark Legion.
Sure. Okay, yeah. Again, not a... I promise that most of my feedback is not just going to be unactuallys for continuity errors.
You're cinema sinsing my ass.
That's right. And this movie's not going to include a lap dance, which means that's 5 extra sins. Those guys fucking suck.
Unless you listen to the podcast, and then you suck a little less. But yeah, you're right. They have seen each other. I didn't even think about that. But they have not visited him.
But sentiment can be, that no one's come to see him.
Yes. Jenny and Jack get up and step out into the night. Victor looks at the floor, deep in thought.
Let me in, Vic.
My only concern is your safety. You know that.
I do.
But I do not know if I can better guarantee it with them or by staying here with you.
I'll support you no matter what you decide.
She touches his arm, and he looks at her.
But they are your family. I know they haven't acted like it, but that's also part of being a family. You and I know that better than anyone. Do what's right for your family. And no matter what, I'll be here to support you in the ways they don't.
A tear falls from Victor's eye onto Cassie's hand. It's a milky white, but Cassie doesn't flinch. They kiss.
I love you, Cassie.
I love you too, Victor. There we go. 2 years in. 2 years after now we've established they're smooching.
They're smooching.
There you go.
Cut to Cassie, standing on the stairs in front of the house as a black car recedes into the night. Once its taillights have disappeared, she heads back inside and stands still for a moment in the entryway, lost in thought. She's shocked out of it by a knock at the door that makes her jump. She turns around and opens it to find Gwen Conliffe and Nick Morton, the latter with his fist still raised mid-knock. He gives that charming Tom Cruise smile and says, "Hey, Cassie, is Victor home?" Cassie just stands with her mouth open, dumbstruck. Cut to an old wooden windmill turning lazily in the English countryside, one of Adelaide's many hidden safe houses. In the cellar, she sits with her legs up, sharpening wooden stakes by hand, a dozen of them laid out on the table in front of her. Dead Weight by White Lung plays from a Bluetooth speaker. Maria sits uncomfortably on the other side of the room. I'm going to be talking to myself here. Hopefully people can follow. So, how are you going to do it? Kill Carmilla, I mean. How? She lifts up the stake she's working on like Maria's an idiot. Stake through the heart. Same way I take care of all you demons. Come on. You spent your whole life dreaming of her death, and that's as creative as you can get. The classics are classics for a reason, Countess. She resumes sharpening in silence. Aren't you going to ask me how I'd do it? Do what? Kill Carmilla. Adelaide sets the stake down and sits forward in her chair. No, and I'll tell you why. When we get there, Carmilla is mine. Your beef was with Dracula, and you missed your shot. Boo-hoo, sorry you won't find closure for your centuries of abuse, so sad. But you don't get to swoop in and take this from me. You got it? Maria smiles, seemingly satisfied by how she was able to get under Adelaide's skin. And Aminette? What's the play there? Adelaide perks up, excited in spite of herself to talk shop. Now that's a different story. See, the last time she rose, Aminette's weakness was mercury, usually sufficient to take down any kind of unholy monster. Usually. As Adelaide says this next part, we cut to a steamer ship on the Atlantic Ocean. Carmilla is on the deck, gazing adoringly at Aminette, who stands on the prow of the ship. A storm rages in the sky, but Aminette has her arms spread wide, magically cutting a smooth path through the water. On either side of the ship, walls of water churn violently and rain pours. We zoom in on Aminette's doubled irises and see little sparks of blue lightning crackling within them. Adelaide voiceover. She wasn't resurrected by purely magical means this time. She was revived using the scientific methods of Caroline Frankenstein, which imbue its subjects with a very different kind of immortality. I call it the spark of life, a literal electric charge that spins infinitely without losing energy, preventing the subject's cells from dying even if the soul is corroded with mercury. And I'm guessing you found a way around that. Adelaide pulls out a large bullet that seems to be made from a spiral of different materials. A mercury bullet blended with a microscopic insulator of my own design. Instantly shuts down the immortality of the cells throughout the system, leaving the mercury free to do its magic. And how many of those bullets do you have? Adelaide grins. Some intel is only for the mortals, Countess. Cut back to Aminette on the prow of the ship. She looks up to the sky and allows the rain to fall on her face, relishing her new life. Adelaide finishes in voiceover. Let's just pray that it's enough. Lightning flashes, and suddenly the ship is gone. Aminette walks confidently on the surface of the water. Lightning strikes again, and now she's replaced with Nick Morton. In the churning reflection below, we can see the decrepit body of Set. Lightning flashes a third time, and Nick is suspended in chains at the top of the lighthouse. Electricity surges through his body, and his irises separate, and just as he opens his mouth to scream, we cut back to Cassie and Victor's home in France. Cassie paces back and forth while Nick and Gwen sit on the couch, where Jack and Jenny sat just an hour before. Nick shakes himself out of the vision he just had. I'm sorry. Who did you say they were meeting up with?
Van Helsing.
Nick is fully alert now. Wait. Adelaide Van Helsing?
I think so. Why? What's wrong?
Nick stands up and heads for the door. We have to go.
Nick, what is it? That's Gwen. Yeah, I thought Van Helsings were the good guys.
Nick shakes his head. Not this one. Evie and I went toe-to-toe with her a few times on our travels, and trust me, she's dangerous. Every second that Victor is with her, his life is in danger. Cassie goes pale.
But Jenny and Jack would never hurt Victor.
No. But they might not know what she's capable of, or worse, think that they can control her. Did they say where they were going? Cassie shakes her head. Gwen gives her a hug before going to join Nick at the door.
Don't worry, Cass. We'll get him back.
But Cassie follows.
I'm going with you.
Cassie?
Don't argue with me, Nick. I'm the one that convinced him to go. I have to be the one to bring him back.
Gwen and Nick exchange a look. Gwen seems more open to it than Nick.
You won't have to babysit me. I can hold my own. Plus...
The bells of the town's church begin to toll. The camera slowly zooms toward the window where we can see its silhouette in the distance.
I think I know someone who can help.
We cut...
Before we cut again,
Yes.
I want to thank you for not leaving Cassie at home this time.
That's right.
I've been feeling bad about how often she gets left at home.
No, Cassie's very
I'm
important
glad
to
that
this
she's
story.
going to be in the gang. She's in the party. She's going on the adventure.
One of the things that I wanted to do with this movie was wrap up some dangling threads.
Yeah.
Before we go into Death's Door. Some phase 3 dangling threads. And one of the things we talked about during Hunchback, you really wanted to give Cassie more of an arc, but there just wasn't room for it.
Yeah.
And so I took that as, okay, well, we still have to do it.
Yeah.
So that's also why I introduced Elsa in the Invisible Man's Revenge, because I was like, these are our sort of Frankenstein loose threads. Let's see if there's a way to pick them up. And so Cassie's coming along. She's not getting left behind. She's part of the adventure.
And I like the way both with Cassie here, Victor and Cassie here, and with Gwen, that this really does feel as if this is where House of Frankenstein and the Carmilla trilogy interweave here. Mm-hmm. This is the finale kind of to both.
Yeah.
So great job in terms of making this work as a conclusion to, or tie into, or continuation of a lot of stories.
Yes. Except for Black Lagoon. Hunter will not be making it.
Yeah, Black Lagoon and Cat People, they're over there. That's fine. That's fine. They don't all have to be.
I honestly just didn't do Hunter because I didn't know what you were going to do with them. You know? And so I had to kind of leave them out of my plans. And we would have just seen them last episode.
Right.
You know?
So it's good to have a little break.
We cut to the interior of a cathedral in Paris. Nick, not Notre Dame. It's gone. Nick walks cautiously through the shadowy bell tower, looking up to the rafters, with Gwen and Cassie following closely behind. Hello? If you're up there, my name is Nick Morton. I'm a friend of Victor's. I know that probably doesn't make you trust me, but we need your help. Cross-cut to the basement of Adelaide's windmill safe house. The 5 members of her team, her, Jenny, Jack, Maria, and Victor, sit and strategize. Maria speaks. If their goal is to reunite Aminette with Set, shouldn't we just find this Morton guy? We can intercept them on their way to him. Jenny shakes her head.
There's a pit stop she needs to make first.
Adelaide raises an eyebrow at her.
The dagger of Set. It's the weapon she sought last time she was revived, and it's also the weapon that killed her. She'll want to ensure it's on her side this time.
So we find it first and add it to our arsenal. Sounds like a job for a tracking spell.
But no, to track something that powerful would require...
Adelaide shoots her a look that silences her. Everyone, let's call it a night. I need to speak with Jenny privately. Cut back to the cathedral. Nick still speaks to the dark rafters. Victor has gotten involved with someone very dangerous. A monster hunter named Van Helsing. She's a ruthless killer who thinks anyone that lives outside the natural order should be killed. You, me, Gwen here, and Victor. Cut back to the English countryside. Jenny and Adelaide sneak into a small village at night, both of them wearing long, hooded cloaks. They stop at the entrance of a pub and peer through the window. A bearded bartender whistles to himself as he closes up shop.
Please, Adelaide, give me a day. I can find someone more deserving.
We don't have a day. We'll be lucky to get to the dagger before her as is. Cut back to Nick as Adelaide continues in voiceover. One life is negligible in the calculus of the apocalypse. Nick continues talking to his unseen subject. But she doesn't just stop with us. She'll kill mortals too if it helps her get what she wants. At this line, we cut to Cassie, who chimes in.
He needs your help. I know you two have your problems, but you know more than anyone how much he's tried to change. He's not a killer anymore. But this Adelaide woman, she'll make him do things. Things we know he'll regret.
Cut back to the pub. Adelaide holds the bartender in an arm lock from behind.
Please, no. My wife, she's waiting for me. She'll be worried sick. You can't...
Do it, Halsey! Jenny winces and slashes the blade across the man's neck, silencing him. Adelaide collects his blood in a vial and hands it to Jenny. Cut back to Cassie.
He just wants to do what's right, and it's a family's job to help keep him on that path.
Back in the pub, Jenny looks to the sky and drizzles the blood on her forehead, reciting a spell as it washes down her face. When the vial is empty, she looks at Adelaide with hollow eyes.
It's where we left it. Underground. London.
Adelaide grins. Good girl. Back in the cathedral, a shadowy figure appears, perched on a wooden beam. The trio watches as he leaps into the darkness, swinging his way down from beam to beam until he lands with a thud in front of them. The trio looks at Quasimodo, played by Daniel Durant. He stands eye to eye with Nick Morton and signs his lines while Cassie translates. I'll come with you, Mr. Morton, but not for him. He turns and approaches Cassie slowly, then signs before embracing her in a warm hug. For you. End of Act 1.
All right, we have assembled a lot of characters here.
Act one is assembling our teams.
Assembling the team.
We have our teams.
Yes,
we have
our
Team
team set up.
Adelaide and Team Nick.
And I think it's interesting to have Quasi on Nick's team and not on Adelaide's, as I would have imagined that he would be on the monster hunting, the more vicious team, given who he used to work for.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's interesting to invert that and have it be that sort of the danger to Victor is that he's on the team that would probably kill him.
Yeah. I wanted to subvert a lot of expectations with this, like the fact that Jack is on Team Adelaide.
Yes.
You know?
And that's just from happenstance, right?
Yeah.
And you've created logical reasons for everyone to be where they are. And it has more to do with who would reach out to whom in what order and less to do with like, it doesn't seem random, mind you, but you haven't, I like the way that you put it together and it's not exactly the way you'd expect.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a good mirror image of each other.
Mm-hmm.
I know why this happened, but Nick is in there monologuing to a guy.
He's reading his lips.
Okay.
He's reading his lips from the rafters.
Quasi cannot hear the monologue.
So I need to come clean about something that I told Dylan last night. I wrote this entire script. I was revising it last night. I was halfway through Act 2. And I was thinking about, who Dylan and I were going to voice and accents and stuff. And I was like, what does Quasi sound like? Does he have like an accent? And I was like, Quasi's deaf. I had completely forgotten through the entire scripting process of this that Quasimodo was deaf. And so I went back and Quasi signs his lines now. There were a couple things I had to kind of work around. But my thing here is that cinematically you will get that Quasi is watching from the rafters.
Okay.
And reads these lips because I wanted
this moment is
the
good.
Reveal of him jumping down and then signing. I think cinematically would work if you don't think about it too hard.
I would also switch when you're intercutting these two things. A better button for your Act 1, much better than "Hey, Quasimodo is here," is "Jenny slits an innocent man's throat." You got to flip those.
Yeah. Well. Yeah. My thought here was I wanted to illustrate why Van Helsing was such a threat while they're trying to explain to Quasimodo why she's a threat.
Yeah, but I think that because you're cutting so closely between the two, I don't think that it undercuts that at all. No pun intended.
Yeah.
I just think that to juxtapose the sweetness of this is family getting together to do something and this is someone who's going down a dark path, I think it intensifies the threat or leaves the audience in a more tense place to close that sequence with the dark note and not with the uplifting note.
I think you're right. I think I was in superhero brain where I was like, oh, here's the pop of, Black Panther showing up or whatever. We're going to pop for our character appearing. But
none of these characters are probably going to be a surprise either.
Yeah.
Like if we're playing the full meta game here.
But
their faces are on the poster.
People still popped when Captain America came out of the shadows in Infinity War, right?
But I think there's a difference between hopefully people loved Quasimodo.
Yeah.
Right? But I don't think that pop is big enough to completely counterbalance the character that we've known since the very first movie in this saga is just done a murder.
Yeah. True.
I think you got to flip those.
That's fair. But
otherwise, it's a little tricky for me because neither of us originated Adelaide, right? But I got to flesh her out a little bit in Dracula. And the voice you have for Adelaide is very different from the one that I had in my head for the character.
That's probably fair. I've got her. She's a little more loquacious.
Yeah, that's the word. I think that's the perfect word. But the thing is that you have her in a position as a protagonist of this movie and the leader of the team that she has to talk more.
Yeah.
Right? She doesn't get to just be guttural, angry, and terse.
Yeah.
Although she does have that big monologue in Dracula Lives.
Yeah.
But she's very sinister here. I think it'll be interesting to see if we gain any sympathy for her throughout the run of this movie, or if she remains kind of the spine around which other characters change.
Yeah.
Let's find out, I guess. I think it's because I've been interrupting fairly often here in Act 1. I don't know that I have a lot of other specific notes. I can tell that you're building these two teams around different themes, right? You basically have Team Love and Team Hate, with a couple of outliers in Team Hate, right? Where there's people who don't really want to be there. And I'm curious as to how we're going to, and if we are, is already Civil War-like, right?
Yes.
It doesn't have to, even though this whole thing's a Marvel imitation experiment at its heart, it doesn't have to necessarily end with these two teams literally fighting about something, right? They could just be, it's an adventure film and they're each going after a goal in parallel, and it's a race to something rather than, big airport fight at the end of Act 2.
True, but remember, I'm a promise of the premise
That's true.
person, and I feel like setting up the teams, people want to see some monsters fighting.
I'm curious as to how we are going to make their goals irreconcilable enough that they have to go into physical conflict against each other. Because right now
one
they
of my
have
challenges as well.
Right, because right now they essentially both want to do. They both want to stop Aminette
Mhm.
and kill Carmilla. Although I guess Nick's team doesn't have any specific beef with Carmilla. She killed Carol. So yeah. They all want to kill Carmilla.
Yeah.
So what is going to
But
be
I
the
don't
thing that
think-
puts a wedge between the two of them? Because for one of them, it's sort of like Nick's team's goal is right now more about we have to protect our friends who are with this psycho.
And yeah, we have to stop Aminette. And also, what do you mean they're with Adelaide? That's terrible.
Yeah. So I don't even think that Carmilla has come into their equation, right? Are they even
I don't
aware?
think they know.
Yeah.
I don't think they're aware of Carmilla.
So I guess that could be the sticky wicket. But like, if that's the case, where do their goals diverge? That's an interesting puzzle you're going to have to solve.
Yes, there's some swings that are coming, and you can let me know if they work or not. But first, we should go to a break.
Take a little break.
We're going to play a clip from our most recent bonus pod where I finally found a Star Trek I enjoyed.
And it's not the one that I expected.
It's not the one anyone expected.
I'm so happy for you, and you explain why this movie appeals to you in a way that, like, I'm like, oh, yeah, you know what? Maybe it's better than I remember it being.
I hope so. We also talked about Before Midnight, which was your least favorite of the Before trilogy.
Yeah, not that it's bad. It's just, God, fucking bummer as hell.
And I quizzed Dylan on rapper names.
That was hopefully very entertaining. I had a great time. Anyway, here's a little clip from that, and we'll be right back, jumping directly into Act 2.
Some of these rappers are real, and the lyrics are real. Some of them are fake, and the lyrics are fake.
Oh, so you wrote lyrics. This is going to be fun.
I wrote some lyrics as well.
I can tell you probably already had a lot of fun with this.
You are going to tell me which ones are real and which ones are fake
Okay.
based on the name and the lyrics. Are you ready to test
Let's
your
go. I'm
hip-hop
stoked.
knowledge?
I'm stoked for this.
Nardo Wick. And the lyric is, I ain't never lacking. I pump gas with my gun out. Scream out what's happening, then get to bussin' till it run out. Is Nardo Wick a real rapper, or did I make him up? Okay, so we're going to go into Act 2, Part 1, and then that will be it for this week.
And then next week, we'll be back with Part 2.
Mm-hmm.
Only 7 days to wait.
Hopefully this will be satisfying in some manner.
I'm scared already.
Act 2. A ship on the choppy seas. The skies are gray, threatening rain, but not delivering. Nick Morton, Gwen Conliffe, Cassie Falk, and Quasimodo sit in the bare industrial hold, serious and a bit anxious. Gwen asks Nick,
Do you think she'll be there?
I don't know. The visions haven't been clear. But this is definitely the lighthouse I've seen, so hopefully we'll at least find a clue to where they've gone. Cassie is as serious as the rest, but despite her lack of immortality, she doesn't look afraid. Instead, she asks Nick,
Aminette's really got you shook, huh?
We have some kind of connection. Truthfully, I don't know why she chose me. Maybe it was just random chance. I just happened to be the first person to find her buried there in a rock. But she killed Jenny once and almost killed me. I was saved by the dagger of Set, but I don't know that I can count on him to save me again. Gwen asks.
What's the plan if we find her?
Nick gives a humorless smile. Be ready to shed your winter coat. A little later, Gwen and Cassie stand on the prow of the ship, looking out at the lighthouse floating on the horizon. Gwen says to Cassie,
You can stay on the ship. Quasi will look after you. You kidding? My publisher wants a treatment for my second book next month. I need to gather material.
Gwen laughs.
Say, what exactly is the deal between you and Vic these days?
Cassie lets out an exaggerated sigh that kind of says, "Ooh, boy."
Well, let's just say that my understanding of the word family has changed a lot over the last 2 years. Mine tried to kill me, and Victor's, well, his family is a damn Mobius strip. But through all the confusion, the only thing that I've known for sure is that I love him. I know it's strange, call it trauma bonding or whatever, but at the end of the day, I can't imagine not coming home to his fragile, squishy little heart. I'm glad to hear that, Cassie, really. But I know what you're really asking, and let's just say that Vic doesn't have the same desires as the rest of us anymore. Lucky for me, I'm free to seek that elsewhere. I mean, good for you, but I swear that's not what I was asking. It's okay. You're a wild animal. You can't help it.
Gwen laughs.
Angry and horny, right? Your words, wolf girl.
That's a reference to the conversation.
Oh, I
they
got
had in
it.
Okay, just making sure people remember that part in Native American Werewolf. Cut to a busy London tube station. A train pulls up and there's a rush of chaos as people cram into it, fighting against the people trying to exit. When the crowd clears, the people left on the platform are Jenny Halsey, Adelaide Van Helsing, Maria Zaleska, Jack Griffin, and Victor Frankenstein, the latter two trying to look as inconspicuous as possible.
Jenny? Are you sure this is where we're going to find Set's dagger thing? Well, it's, looked a bit different last time I was here. I always pictured it spookier. Hard to remember exactly, since I was busy dying and being revived by Nick, but as I recall, yes, it was.
Time marches on. The past gets erased.
No time to wax poetic. Follow your nose, Jenny. Jenny sighs and closes her eyes. From her POV, we see a faint purple trail light up on the ground, leading away from the platform.
This way.
They walk down a crowded stairway, which opens into an expansive underground mall. Jenny's jaw drops. This doesn't feel like the home of an ancient magical dagger, Jenny. Maybe there's an antique shop?
This was a mass grave. Half-submerged catacombs filled with the bodies of the Crusaders. Well, I hope they're not still here, like buried under that H&M. Feels like a poltergeist situation waiting to happen. The dagger is here, I'm sure of it.
She leads them through the crowded mall commons area, Jack and Victor attracting stares from the people they bump into. Eventually, Jenny slows to a stop and looks up at something in front of them.
It's here. Of course.
Reverse shot. We see that the gang is standing in front of the entrance of a particular UK chicken chain.
Of course it's under a freaking Nando's.
Back to the lighthouse. Back to the lighthouse. Nick's team has come ashore and clamber over the rocks to the entrance to the lighthouse. They enter and climb the spiral staircase cautiously, noting the piles of dust that used to be vampire sentries. At the top, they step through the metal door into the open-air light station. It's deserted now, but Aminet's sarcophagus still hangs loose from the chains above the floor. Cassie and Quasi examine this apparatus closely.
Are these?
Quasi nods and signs. My sister's methods.
You mean they Frankensteined Aminet?
As if she wasn't hard enough to kill the first time. Cassie follows a thick cable from the sarcophagus to some machinery along the inner wall where the lantern spins. She notices some buttons on the machine's panel that look like elevator buttons. Curious, she pushes the down button and a door slides open under the lantern.
Guys?
They gather around the open door.
Where do you suppose this goes?
Cut to moments later, as the elevator door dings open with all of them inside. It opens into a massive underwater facility. Bay windows look out into the water around them. All the doors in the room are emblazoned with the Prodigium logo.
This place belongs to Prodigium?
Nick slowly shakes his head, still looking around apprehensively at the deserted lobby as if something could jump out at any moment. Not anymore. There's a crackling from the reception area. The gang follows the sound behind the desk and see an abandoned portable radio. A female voice pokes through the static. Shh, en route. Shh, London. Shh, dagger.
Maybe Carmilla?
Everyone shrugs. Who knows?
This place looks pretty abandoned.
Keep your guard up. You could have left some sentries behind. They venture deeper into the facility. It's on emergency power, and some of the lights are flickering and failing, giving big alien vibes. Or maybe that underwater? Was that the, alien movie?
Alien one, yeah.
It's just enough light to see the shadows of ocean creatures passing by the windows. The corridors are a labyrinth. Nick and Gwen are in front, and even though Quasi should be watching Cassie's back, she's fallen behind the rest of them. They pass by a pitch-black hallway running perpendicular to them, and just as Cassie walks by it, a crackle of electricity draws her attention. She peers into the darkness, and there's another blue spark way in the distance. We're trained on her face as we hear another, much larger spark, and suddenly the hallway illuminates. We don't see what she sees. We just see her jaw drop and her face go pale. She tries to yell to the others, but all she manages is,
Guys.
She takes a few slow steps into the hallway. The rest of the group continues on without her, unaware that she's been left behind. We follow in front of Cassie as she moves slowly, as if in a trance, the tension building, until finally she stops and gazes up at the thing that caught her attention. The camera finally reverses to see what she sees. Her sister, Elsa Falk, played by Gwendolyn Christie, chained to a steel slab and hooked up to various electrical equipment. Cut back to London. The team inconspicuously slides themselves into a booth in the back of the Nando's. Where is it, Halsey? Jenny points directly underneath their feet. Maria speaks as Adelaide starts rummaging through her bag. So, how do we get this thing? Does anyone here have, magic drilling powers or something? Adelaide has crawled under the table where she says, I'd advise you all to get clear, quickly. Jack peers under to see her planting a stack of dynamite about to light the fuse.
Hey, are you crazy? This place is full of people.
We're on the clock, Griffin. You want to play hero? Be my guest. She lights it and dives out from under the table to take cover. The rest of the team gets up and starts shouting for everyone to get clear, but the diners are just confused. Victor grabs a few children from a nearby table and shields them. Jenny, Maria, and Jack try to grab a few people as they run, but the restaurant is still full when the bomb detonates. All sound is swallowed by a sudden tinnitus. Muffled screams slowly swell through the ringing, and Jenny awakes to see people running through the chaos, covered in blood, attempting to help the injured. Before the smoke has cleared, Adelaide is running back through the din to jump into the crater made by the dynamite. She tosses aside broken pieces of the table they had sat at and digs through the dirt underneath. After a few moments, her hand pokes out of the hole, triumphantly holding the dagger of Set. As Jenny's hearing slowly returns, a voice cuts through the noise.
Thank you so much, Ms. Van Helsing. The service here is truly impeccable.
Jenny turns to see Carmilla standing at the entrance of the restaurant next to Aminette, the two of them flanked by a dozen female vampire goons. Adelaide climbs out of the hole, gripping the dagger tightly. Carmilla?
Hello, little one. You've grown up.
Some of us still age. Imagine that.
Stop. You flatter me. I'd love to stay and catch up, but my friend here has a date. We'll be taking our order to go.
Cut back to Nick, Gwen, and Quasi exploring the undersea facility. Quasi glances over his shoulder to check on Cassie. When he sees she's missing, he tugs on Nick's shirt to get him and Gwen to stop. Shit. Quasi gestures for them to go on ahead while he goes back for her. Cut to Cassie, who's climbed on top of some machinery to check Elsa's pulse. She's alive.
Elsa? Elsa, can you hear me?
No response. Cassie manages to undo the clasp on Elsa's wrist, then hops down to climb up and do the other side. We cut to a close-up of Elsa's eyes as they slowly flutter open. Cut to Nick and Gwen, who enter into a large observation deck surrounded by glass windows. All is quiet until they hear a low growl to their left. As soon as they turn towards it, there's another from the right. Then, in front of them, a panther leaps up onto a computer bank and snarls. Finally, there's a metal clang as the door behind them slams shut. They turn to see Emma, played by Jasmine Savoy Brown, standing there with her head cocked. The princess told us to expect you, Mr. Morton, but even she didn't think you'd come so ill-prepared. Nick and Gwen exchange cocky smirks.
We're a little tougher than we look.
You better hope so, Gwen. She talks into a radio in her hand. Eyes on Set, mother. In the burnt-out Nando's ruins in London, Carmilla hears this broadcast. She turns to Aminette.
Mr. Morton is right on time, princess.
Aminette raises a hand and the dagger of Set jerks toward her, trying to break free of Adelaide's grip. But Adelaide grits her teeth and squeezes down as hard as she can, even as her body begins to slide along the floor towards the burnt mummy. The blade begins to slip. In a flash, Adelaide draws her gun from her hip holster, firing straight at Aminette. But just as quickly, one of the vampires dives in front of the princess in panther form, taking the bullet to the chest, then falling to the floor as a woman and writhing in excruciating pain from the custom bullet. The vampires take action, transforming and charging at Adelaide. Adelaide screams at Jenny for help, and she rushes in to grab Adelaide's hand around the blade. Jack, Victor, and Maria get to their feet to try to intercept the Panthers, but they're overrun, and one of the Panthers gets through them and tackles Adelaide and Jenny backwards into the crater. Jenny hits hard and rolls away, losing her grip, but Adelaide hangs on admirably, straining against the force of the magic. The Panther leaps onto her chest, and she holds its gnashing fangs away with her other hand. Finally, she loses it. The dagger of Set flies out of the crater and lands in the grip of Aminette. She smiles and looks down at the dagger, finally reunited. There you are, my love. She brings the blade to her mouth and licks its edge, slicing a long gash down the center of her tongue that oozes black blood. She holds the blade to her forehead and closes her eyes. Now, awake. We flash through a quick series of images. Amenet floating above the lighthouse, Nick walking through the sands of Iraq, Set approaching Amenet in ancient Egypt, Nick and Amenet kissing in a loving embrace. When the flash ends, we're back in the underwater observation deck as Nick starts to spasm.
Nick?
Emma smiles. Nick falls to his knees. His hands begin to rot and turn as black as ash. His irises separate and his body grows, transforming into a hulking version of the Set we saw in The Mummy 2017 and The Mummy's Hand, a demon made of ancient flesh.
Nick, you can control him.
Nick just raises his head and roars at her, his mouth a mess of fangs and black spittle.
All right, let's do this the fun way.
Gwen puts her fingers in the sides of her mouth and tears her lips open sideways, making room for an enormous wolf snout to push through. She keeps tearing at her flesh until the wolf is free. She lunges at Nick, and the two 10-foot beasts begin to battle. Cut to Quasi, still backtracking through the hallways. He doesn't hear the crash, nor the roar of rage, but he does see the computer monitor that flies out of the hallway into the wall in front of him. He squats down, then leaps up to the ceiling, grabbing the light fixtures and swinging towards the source. In the lab, Elsa has awoken and is thrashing, knocking over the machinery and trying to grab Cassie.
Elsa, it's me. I'm trying to help you.
But Elsa doesn't respond. It's unclear whether she even can. Her body is a matrix of burn scars from being repeatedly struck by lightning. Her hair is a wild gray tangle stretching out straight from her head. Her split lips snarl and her eyes are filled with madness. Out in the hallway, Quasi swings, just as Cassie comes running out a dozen yards ahead of him. She doesn't see him and runs the opposite direction, chased by Elsa. Quasi stops for a split second, eyes wide, then gives chase. In the observation deck, Gwen and Nick tussle while the vampires circle them in panther form, watching eagerly. Nick's touch is necrotic. He grabs Gwen by the arm and the flesh instantly rots. Her muscles go limp. Gwen responds by tearing her own arm off at the shoulder and letting it grow back.
Dope.
Gwen is stronger and grabs Nick by the head, attempting to rip it from his body. Nick opens his mouth wide and a swarm of locusts fly out, covering Gwen's face and filling her mouth until she lets go. Back in London, Adelaide and Jenny peer out of the crater in horror at Amenet and the blade. We can't let her leave here with that dagger.
What's the plan?
Plan A is you give her your best shot, and you better make it good. You won't like Plan B. Jenny gives her an exasperated look, then winds up and shoots a purple ball of energy at Amenet. Not just energy, though. A closer look reveals a demonic face in the sphere, teeth gnashing as it flies toward the princess. Amenet, still distracted by her control of Nick, takes the hit in the chest and is thrown back out of the Nandos into the main concourse where people are still fleeing. Back in the observation deck, Gwen is still on the ground coughing up locusts when suddenly Nick is thrown across the room as if also hit in the chest. He hits the far window hard, and the glass begins to crack. Back in London, Carmilla helps Amenet to her feet. It's clear that Amenet is only half present, the other half connected to Nick at the lighthouse.
Come on, it's time to go.
Back in the crater, Adelaide grits her teeth and hops out. The rest of the team is still fighting the vampires. Guess it's time for Plan B. She scrambles for her backpack in the wreckage and pulls out a remote control.
What the hell is that?
We Van Helsings have a saying. If you can't win, make sure you both lose. She hits a button on the remote control. Around the mall, support beams begin to explode. Civilians running for the exits screech to a halt as every staircase, escalator, and exit hall collapse into rubble. Even Carmilla and Amenet are brought to a stop. Jack frees himself from the vampire he's fighting and runs to the crater.
What the hell are you doing? There's people down there.
I'm stopping our targets from escaping.
This ain't how we do things.
You want to live? There's a safe pocket near the tube station where we came in. You have 30 seconds to get there before the skyscraper above us sends Amenet and Carmilla back to hell. Even Jenny's mouth falls open at this. But Adelaide just lifts the remote and presses another button. A 30-second timer starts. You're a Van Helsing now, Jack. Back to the underwater facility. Elsa has chased Cassie into a medical bay, cramped with gurneys and medical equipment. She tears her way through the space, roaring and overturning everything in her path. Cassie dives for cover under a table on the far end, but in moments Elsa is there and tosses aside the meager shelter.
Elsa, please, I'm sorry. Let's just talk this out.
But Elsa's not home. She raises her hands to strike, but before she can, Quasimodo swings in and kicks her to the side. He gestures for Cassie to run. Quasi lands on top of Elsa, raining blows down on her before she can get back up. Elsa manages to throw Quasi off, but he grabs a support pole and seamlessly swings back around to kick Elsa in the chest just as she's getting up. He leaps at her again, but she's had enough. She catches him by his neck and throws him across the room, then leaves in pursuit of Cassie. Back in the observation deck, Emma watches Nick and Gwen fighting with satisfaction. Gwen grabs Nick and throws him across the room, and once he's out of the way, Emma sees what had been obscured from her before. The cracks in the window, rapidly spreading. Her eyes go wide, and she turns to the door controls, but she's too frantic and enters the code incorrectly. Crash. The window shatters, and the ocean pours in. Everyone is taken in by it. Nick, Gwen, the Panthers. The camera rushes through the underwater chaos and lingers for a moment on Emma, screaming and helpless. Back to London. Jack, Maria, and Victor are trying to gather the screaming mob to the quote-unquote safe area, which appears to be a section under 2 wide steel pillars. Nobody's listening to them. Meanwhile, Adelaide advances on the trapped Carmilla and Aminet, a smug smile on her face and her gun raised. She fires 3 shots and Carmilla magically deflects the bullets at the last second. You think your beginner magic will hold up an entire skyscraper? Huh? A panther dives at Adelaide. Adelaide stakes her in midair. It's enough time for Carmilla to push the entranced Aminet away. You got 20 seconds, princess! Jack runs up to Jenny.
It's not working! There's not enough time!
Jenny looks around, helpless, torn between Jack and Adelaide. She shouts at Victor to come over.
Victor, you're invincible, right?
To the best of my knowledge.
Jenny draws her hunting knife.
I need you to trust me.
Back at the lighthouse, Set and Gwen are sucked out of the broken window into the open ocean. We see through Gwen's POV as her enormous body tumbles over itself, flailing for control in the water. She slows to a stop, with Set in front of her, also tumbling. But as he spins, he begins to transform, taking a familiar shape. That of the creature from the Black Lagoon, but pitch black instead of green. He roars and rockets towards her, now completely at ease in their new environment, while Gwen thrashes in slow motion, weighed down by her fur. Cut to Cassie, still being chased by Elsa. The hallway she's in seems to dead end at a steel door. There's a button to open it, but this place was not designed with accessibility in mind. She jumps up to hit it, but misses. Elsa is gaining on her. Jumps again, misses. Elsa is just a few yards away. She jumps one last time, hits the button, and the door opens, just as Elsa grabs her by the collar, swings her around, and throws her through the doorway. As Elsa chases her in, the camera pans to reveal the sign on the other side of the door. Pocket Lagoon. Authorized personnel only. Do not enter unaccompanied. London. 10 seconds left on the timer. Victor kneels on the ground, head bowed. Jenny stands behind him.
This will hurt.
Do it.
Jenny draws her blade across Victor's neck. Thick, half-congealed blood begins to ooze out, but not fast enough. Jenny makes a face and squeezes the sides of Victor's neck, forcing out thick blobs of blood onto the floor. It'll have to do. She recites a spell and raises a hand straight in the air. In slow motion, the pillars holding up the skyscraper above explode nearly simultaneously. At the same time, purple energy flashes out from Jenny's hand, creating small pockets around the explosions, freezing them in time a millisecond after they burst. Everyone cowers from the blast, including Carmilla, and then open their eyes when they realize that the sky hasn't fallen. But try as she might, Jenny can't undo the damage, and she's clearly struggling to hold the blast in place. Adelaide is furious. Halsey! She charges toward Jenny, but Jack and Maria intercept, holding her back. She reaches to her hip as the 3 of them struggle, going for her gun. Carmilla sees this and turns to Aminet.
Deepest apologies, princess, but I need your full attention.
Carmilla tears the dagger out of Aminet's hand, breaking her concentration. Aminet immediately roars with rage, turning to Carmilla, her face becoming horrifying and demonic, with black eyes and an impossibly large mouth full of fangs. Carmilla winces.
Morton can wait. For now, we need to retreat.
Aminet looks at the frozen, half-exploded pillars. She stretches out her hands, and suddenly all the dust and debris in the mall levitates and trembles in midair. The explosions reverse themselves, coalescing back into solid cement. Jenny releases her spell and collapses to her knees just as a shot rings out. A bullet flies through the air and leaves a hole in the pillar next to Jenny, right where her head was. Jenny looks in shock at Adelaide, still restrained by Jack and Maria, but with one arm outstretched and holding a smoking gun. Back to the Atlantic Ocean. Gwen is struggling with the enormous jet-black set creature hybrid. And while her lung capacity is greatly improved in her wolf form, she's running out of breath. The creature slashes at her as she begins to go limp, her eyes rolling back into her head, her chest heaving. And then, suddenly, the creature goes still. Its black eyes fade to brown, human eyes, and it begins to shrink into the form of Nick Morton. He sees Gwen in front of him and grabs her fur with both hands, hauling her to the surface. Meanwhile, Cassie goes flying through the air into an enormous black room the size of an airplane hangar. The entire room is submerged in perfectly still water, bisecting the space and creating an exact reflection of both Cassie's body and the rows of fluorescent lights on the ceiling. She hits the water with a splash and sinks, momentarily lifeless from the shock. Then she spasms and gasps, inhaling water but finding that somehow she can breathe. In the far distance, she thinks she can see a faint orange glow from somewhere near the surface. Then her attention is diverted by another splash from above her. It's Elsa, but she's not below the surface with Cassie. Somehow she's floating above the surface in what should be air, but swimming as if it's water. She flounders for a moment, confused by the physics of this place, but then sees Cassie below her and swims for the surface. But when she gets there, she hits it hard with a thunk, as if they were separated by a thick pane of glass. Elsa pounds on it in frustration. Cassie swims a bit closer. She speaks, her voice muffled a bit by the water.
Elsa, are you in there?
She lets out a frustrated yell in response.
Look, I don't know what happened to you, but I only want to help you. We're the only family we've got left.
Finally, Elsa speaks. Because of you. You killed our entire family, and then you killed me.
You were all trying to kill me at my fucking wedding. Because you couldn't stand that I didn't want to live the same life as all of you.
I've been tortured by vampires for years because of you and that monster of yours. I've been killed, electrocuted, and brought back over and over again. And the only thing that got me through it was the thought of this moment, when I'd get to wrap my hands around your neck and finally be the last Falk standing. Cassie is furious at this, but tries to quell her anger.
Look! I'd be lying if I said I didn't also lie awake some nights picturing you dead on that slab in Switzerland. But even knowing you were gone, that I survived you and Dad's plan, it didn't fix anything. I spent years in therapy trying to heal the pain of what you did to me, and honestly, at this point, I don't know if I'll ever get there. Maybe you and I will never be family again. Maybe we'll always hate each other. I can't control how you feel about me or how I feel about you. The one thing I can do is forgive you.
Elsa is quiet, unsure how to respond to this. Cassie raises her hand up and puts her fingers gently on the surface between them.
Come here. I want to try something.
Elsa doesn't trust her. What are you doing?
For the first time since we were kids, I'm going to try loving you.
Elsa reaches out her own hand, touching her fingers lightly to Cassie's. As soon as she does, there's a spark of blue electricity. It races across the surface of the water, spreading in all directions. Cassie and Elsa are thrown in opposite directions, away from the surface, their bodies glowing with the flickering blue light. When Elsa finally slows, it's as if she's no longer in water but in air, as she should be, and she comes plummeting back down toward the water's surface. She hits it with a splash and sinks down to join Cassie at the black steel floor of the pocket lagoon. The two sisters look at each other for a long moment, Cassie ready for an attack. But Elsa just holds out her hand. Cassie takes it, and they swim to the surface together, hand in hand. Cut to the exterior of the lighthouse island. Nick drags Gwen's limp body to shore, now transformed back to her human self. He gives her CPR on a rock, and eventually she coughs herself back to life.
Where are the others?
I don't know. I lost control. What happened?
The base flooded. You don't think...
Just then, the lighthouse door opens, and Quasi, Cassie, and Elsa come out to join them. Thank God you guys are okay. He gets to his feet and freezes as his neck cranes up to stare at the giant Elsa in front of him. And, who is this?
Nick? Gwen? Meet my sister, Elsa, the newest member of the House of Frankenstein.
Nick shakes her huge hand. It's a pleasure. Clearly, we could use all the help we could get. Back to the underground mall in London. Carmilla whispers something in Aminette's ear, then turns toward Adelaide's team.
This was fun, girls, but we must be off. Jenny, Adelaide, it was so good to see you again.
She blows them a kiss, and then Aminet turns to sand and whisks away between the cracks of the rubble. Carmilla and the remaining vampires transform into bats and fly out through a hole in the ceiling. Immediately, Adelaide and Jenny charge at each other. Jenny decks Adelaide across the jaw.
Try to kill me, will you? After all these months of planning.
Plans that you ruined! Adelaide grabs her by the collar and tries to throw her to the ground, but they both fall, still wrestling. Victor moves to interfere, still oozing blood from his neck, but Maria stops him. Let them work it out. On the ground, Jenny and Adelaide hiss at each other while they fight, both of them bleeding.
I wasn't going to let you kill my friends.
Then you don't understand what we're up against. Now they've both escaped. And trust me, Halsey, you're really not going to like what we have to do now.
What the hell are you talking about?
Adelaide grabs Jenny and rolls them around so Adelaide is sitting on top of Jenny's chest. She pulls their faces close and says quietly, "Now we have to kill Nick Morton." End of part 1.
That is a whole lot of action.
So apparently my move, this is something I've learned about myself in this podcast, is that my go-to move when we have a lot of people is, you separate them into small groups and have them all do an action scene at the same time.
Right. The old Return of the Jedi trick.
I pushed us to do that in House of Dracula, and then I really pushed us to do it in Mummy's Hand. All of our Act 2 Part 1s have always been this.
Yeah,
basic structure.
That's kind of how you handle a large team doing action, because otherwise, it's not like having a Bruce Lee style fight where it's one person against lots of people. You need to separate them. You need to give them individual objectives. You need to give them their own little stories to tell. This ends up being kind of a lot because you end up splitting both of the parties.
Mm-hmm.
So you end up with either 3 or 4 parallel stories happening at once. And the pacing of that's very hard to manage.
Yeah. It was a lot this took me days and days to write.
I'm sure. It's very complicated.
I kept being like, oh, holy shit, this is way longer than I thought. I did not think it was going to be this long. I was like, it'll be like, 10 pages.
And you throw in a lot of complications to each of these.
Yes.
Like, all right, let me just review, because I think this might be the kind of thing that's difficult to follow over the air.
True.
So we should probably go through and break down each of these events.
Maybe music cues will help too. With the changes.
I do plan to give them each their own sort of loop.
Yeah.
That will hopefully help. But, okay, so we have the London team.
Yes.
I want to throw this note in here. We do not need Adelaide to blow up the Nandos with people in it. We only need her to threaten to do it, because we're going to get her blowing up a bunch of people later.
That's true.
And I think that doing both,
it's a lot.
You don't get the opportunity to feel her killing a bunch of people at the beginning of this. I think that you need to have her take the dynamite to establish that she will do it.
Yeah.
And then have a moment for her and Jenny to go over her head and get the Legion to evacuate the place first. And then,
or they just recover the dagger
by other means, right?
Yeah.
And then, then later, when Adelaide does not have anyone to stop her, and she does something way bigger, that feels like more of a big moment. I think that the little bang is going to blow out the big bang.
Yeah, I ran into this a couple times, and I fixed a few of them on the first revision, where in like some of the bigger scenes, I was like, okay, I know I need to establish this, so I'll do this right at the top. And then as I keep writing, that same sort of thing also ends up getting established later in the scene anyway. And so I was going back, I was like, I kind of do this twice. And I think there's a lot of that. I'm kind of over-explaining, or I'm sort of over-establishing some stakes where like, I think I went into this like, okay, we need to establish that Adelaide's going to do anything here, so we'll blow up the table. But then she does all those explosions later, and it turns out we don't really need it. But
I mean, that's the kind of thing where I know that
revision, yeah,
I know that like I've been in your shoes there, where you just finished this,
but I think you're right. That scene can escalate more slowly. And
okay, so in London we have Carmilla and Aminet are our 2 main antagonists here.
Yes.
The rest of them are nondescript, right?
Yeah,
but she's brought some random vampires with them. They're all here for the dagger. Mm-hmm. Jenny's team Adelaide is there to stop them. They fail. Aminet gets the dagger.
Yes.
That connects Aminet to Nick, who is in the underwater facility. Cool new setting, by the way.
Yeah.
I also like how this is the first movie to have action happen like on a boat on the ocean, as opposed to underwater, blah, blah, blah. But you had mentioned in previous episode that you were having trouble finding new sort of settings and environments for action.
The
Cool.
lighthouse and
lighthouse
then
is
an
a good one.
underwater facility. Yeah.
Yes, and 2 things on boats, which we haven't been using at all.
Yeah.
Okay, so then she connects to Nick. Nick turns into, basically is overwhelmed by Set.
Sets out. Yep.
Set for a while when it becomes an underwater fight after the glass cracks and the ocean floods in, turns into, basically shapeshifts into the shape of the creature from the Black Lagoon.
The idea here being that he is a god.
Right, so he can do what he wants,
He
and
can
that's
adapt to
that's a
the
useful
water.
form for fighting in the water. And plus, we
Exactly.
kind of get to have a Alpha Wolf Gwen versus creature fight.
Exactly. And
Kind of like how in X-Men 97, Morph gets to change into all the X-Men who aren't in the show.
exactly. And also because the creature is clearly tied to death in some way. So
Yeah.
it makes sense that one of Death's forms would be that of the creature that he could turn into.
Right. Meanwhile, Cassie senses that Elsa is here.
Sees some sparks.
Yes.
And then sees
Goes
Elsa.
after it, finds Elsa, who has been experimented on for years by Prodigium as they kill her, wake her
By
back
Carmilla.
up. By Carmilla, but in this
Yes.
Prodigium facility.
Yes.
Okay. To kill her, bring her back, kill her, bring her back, or blah, 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 blah. But you've tied in this idea from my hunchback that when you are bringing someone back Frankenstein style,
Mhm.
the body gets restored by all the science, but the soul is restored by either a spark of love or a spark of hate.
Yes.
And Elsa has only been revived with a spark of hate up until this point.
Yes.
So, with a little help from Quasi, Cassie does not get killed despite all the death flags waving over her head throughout this whole episode so far.
Mm-hmm.
They tumble into apparently a Prodigium designed pocket lagoon,
Yes.
which allows you to play with the physics, the weird physics of the Black Lagoon. I assume we're not going to talk about how or why this exists. It's just a cool thing to have.
It makes sense. It's something Prodigium would have.
Sure.
Right?
Listen, I gave them a miniature sun.
And-
So,
It was one of the things I thought of when it was an underwater facility. I was like, well, what can I do with
why,
water? Ooh,
yeah. And why is it underwater? Right. So there's an idea. And so they go into that thing, they get separated by the plane of reflection, which we've seen happen.
and I wanted to play with the reflection of Elsa and Cassie, sisters,
Yes.
opposite in stature, on opposite sides of things, and that this would be where their reunion happens.
Okay. And then Cassie, having learned about how this all works in Hunchback, tries to basically revive Elsa, restore Elsa's soul through love.
Yes.
And that works. Plus, we have a cool different image with being conducted through the fluids of the lagoon.
Mm-hmm.
So she's a good guy now. Meanwhile, in London,
Yes.
Adelaide realizes that they're losing the fight and throws basically a doomsday switch.
Mm-hmm.
She's willing to drop the whole mall on all of them. They would all die, but the threat would be ended,
And
theoretically.
the building above them. Yeah.
Yes.
So everyone also presumably in that skyscraper would die. She's about to do a terrorist attack.
But yeah, a couple thousand people are about
Yeah.
to die, but it would theoretically end the threat of Carmilla and Amunet.
Yes.
So that's a really good expression of Adelaide's thing and an escalation from what we've seen her do before.
Mm-hmm.
But Jenny uses some magic, using Victor's blood as a sacrifice. A
Mhm.
good bit that I like that. I like that that's a way to sort of to play on what she's done previously, but in a way that is reflective of her philosophy.
Yeah.
And it keeps Victor involved because I can feel like we kind of lose him a little bit in
Yeah.
this sequence.
That another thing. There's a couple characters that really just don't get enough to do in here.
Sure.
Maria.
There's just
yeah.
a lot going on,
Yeah.
right?
There's a lot. Going on.
And Jenny suspends the explosion.
Yep.
Which also happens to save Amunet and Carmilla.
Yes.
But because they're now at a stalemate and need to get out of there, Carmilla makes Amunet drop the dagger.
Mhm.
She takes a dagger, right?
Yeah.
Carmilla has it now.
Yep.
Which separates Nick from Set, ending that fight. Everything's cool now in London.
Or everything's cool in the ocean.
In the ocean,
Yeah.
sorry, not
Nick
in London.
pulls her up.
Adelaide fires a shot at someone, but I don't...
Jenny.
At Jenny.
So because
Okay.
Jenny is holding the thing open, Halsey's trying to stop Jenny from stopping the collapse.
Okay.
And so she's reaching for her gun while Maria and Jack are holding her back. And Jenny drops to the ground because Amunet ends everything right before Adelaide pulls the
right.
trigger.
So if everything hadn't timed out exactly as it did,
Adelaide
Adelaide
would
have
Jenny.
killed Jenny. And that's why, and that's when then they had their little wrestling match afterwards.
Yes.
So now we've kicked the danger down the road a little bit. Amunet has the dagger, which
Mhm.
is bad.
Yes.
And now, as a consequence of that, Team Adelaide has a new objective. They have to kill Nick.
Yes.
Okay. That's a great way to create the separation.
And you were wondering what was going to be the thing that
I was.
puts the teams on opposite sides.
Yes. Now
It's Nick.
it does. I suppose it's naturally easier, right? Because you can sneak up on that guy. But okay, I think this has been a jam-packed first half of the episode. So much going on.
It had to be 2 episodes.
Yes, absolutely. We are coming up on 2 hours of recording right now.
Yeah.
We are just absolutely soaked in sweat, and we have another 2 hours work to do.
Yes.
So,
is there any other wrap up we need to do? Or are we just going to say, be back here next week? We will figure out how these 2 teams, make up and all.
Yeah,
our
I have more
friends
thoughts,
and kisses.
but yeah, I think I have more thoughts, but these are things that can wait until we're done with the whole story.
So we will leave you on this cliffhanger for now. And in 1 week, join
We
us
kill
right back
Nick Morton.
here. We kill Nick Morton in Van Helsing Part 2. So we'll see you then, everybody. We'll see you. Please tell us your thoughts on. We would love to hear more predictions, right? Because we can't read them on air because we're about to do Part 2. But
y'all can
in
have
this
fun.
week,
Yeah.
hit us up on social media, hit the Discord. Let us know where you think this is going to go.
I hear Spotify's adding a comments section. Can we get some nice comments in there?
Yeah, I don't know how frequently we'll check it, but that'd be nice.
Yeah.
And since we're talking about that, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. It's been like a year since
we never
we've gotten
ask
any.
anybody to do reviews, but it would be great if
It
you
would be
did.
cool. Join the Patreon if you want to talk to other fans about this Part 1. I'm sure there will be a lot of discussion on the Discord.
Yes, you can join us for $5 a month, get a 7-day free trial. Go to patreon.com/Dylan and Dalton. That includes the bonus podcast,
Of course,
Discord
bonus pod.
access, bonus episodes of Future Endeavors, my weird YouTube series about wrestling,
Movie nights.
and we have movie nights, which are great. It's just a wonderful creative space.
And until next time,
Stay afraid of the dark universe.